Okay, I'm going to just introduce these wonderful people. Well, I don't know if I should call Amelia wonderful, but
Kenny Freeze.
and then I'm going to scoot away and give them everything. So,
Give me everything.
Amelia Lander-Cavallo is a blind artist, academic, facilitator, and theater practitioner, and is co-director of Quiplash, an LGBTQ plus disabled-led arts training and consultation not-for-profit. I think you should make money. Don't say not-for-profit.
Oh, well, I'll get to that. Don't
Yes,
worry.
I know.
Yeah. Trying.
As an artist and theater practitioner, their performance practice is multidisciplinary, spanning mediums such as aerial circus, drag, and burlesque. They also create their own shows. Most recent works include An Evening with Tito Bone and You All Are Lucky I'm Still Here. Lander-Cavallo has also worked for almost 20 years in the field of audio description, supporting artists and companies to find exciting and creative ways to utilize the Access tool. As an academic, Lander-Cavallo has written multiple internationally published pieces on AD and Access, including their recent book, Integrated Access in Live Performance, from Routledge in 2022. As a company director and facilitator, they have trained multiple audio describers working with Quiplash, as well as other AD-based organizations, such as Vocal Eyes, that's a really interesting title, the Audio Description Association, and Superior Description. I'm from Canada.
Yeah.
Nothing in Canada.
Shout out Rebecca Singh.
Yeah, but nothing in Canada is superior. I know that.
Except for Rebecca Singh. She's pretty cool.
And my husband.
Yeah.
Amelia just brings this out in people. It's just.
I bring this out in Kenny. I claim nothing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. Lander-Cavallo has also founded their own methodology of integrating AD into art, media, and marketing that encompasses the principles, voice, and ethos of a project, as well as removing access barriers for blind and visually impaired people. And I just want to say, I mean, I know Amelia a little bit, because they were part of Queering the Crip, Cripping the Queer, and I must say the audio description that they did for one of the piece in the shows is one of the funniest things. My husband was on the floor. It's really, really hysterical. But also, they were part of the performance festival that was part of the exhibition, and it was just amazing. It was like, for 2 weeks, everything in Berlin seemed to be queer and disabled, and especially when Quiplash was performing. It was one of the most joyous, incredible things I've ever experienced. It was just fantastic. Shivaangee. Okay, see, everyone gets it wrong, and I will speak with a Brooklyn accent no matter what. Is a dancer, maker, and researcher with an experimental practice that orbits sound making, collective composition, and creative technology. The choreographic approach foregrounds folk dance influences. She's interested in relational and social virtuosity rather than more conventional forms of spectacle. I like that. I might use that one. Shivaangee works across different roles in the studio, including choreographing, rehearsal, directing, facilitating, and audio describing. You're very busy. Underpinning these different modes of working is a commitment to holding space carefully and with accountability. They are constantly curious about dance as a medium through which we can stay with our multiplicities across our physical, social, relational, autobiographical, and political experiences. You can understand more about their work here and more about thinking here. These are here's because this is, they're just links, but that's okay. This is the lingo now, right? Now I know you. So I give these wonderful people the stage.
Thank you. Thank you, Kenny. As mentioned, my name is Amelia. My pronouns are they, them. I am a slimmish white person with a brown and gray mullet, brown eyes that dance around and look everywhere except for the place I'm actually focusing, a big Italian nose with a septum ring in it. I'm wearing a rainbow keffiyeh, a teal, meshy, holy shirt over top a black tank top. Fun fact, my wife knitted this teal, meshy, cool thing. I know, more on that in a second. And some blue jeans and some black high top shoes. And then Shiv.
Hi, my name is Shivaangee. My pronouns are they, them. I am a person of South Asian Indian heritage, so I am brown-skinned. And today I am femme, so I am wearing big chunky earrings and a green scrunchie that's been made from a recycled sari and green flares. And I have two nose piercings, if that helps to visualize me.
Thank you very much. Just a little kind of logistical note. One is, I keep thinking of Abby's terms around interruptions, and I think as lovely as this space is, full of queer Crip people who want a relaxed environment and are making a relaxed environment, the literal architecture in this room fights against that. So please, if you aren't already doing this, you wiggle, stim, stretch, doodle, tick, make a sculpture. I don't mind. Do whatever is going to keep you. This is the last presentation in a very jam-packed filled couple of days. And I want to just acknowledge that the lack of windows, the low ceiling, the strange lighting, all of that kind of stuff, which is completely out of control of the wonderful organizers, makes people feel like they need to sit in normalcy, but that's not this group. So please do what you need to do. Also, I can't see you. So the more noise, please don't be polite in English, or if you're not English, don't fall into polite Englishness just because you're here. Making noise helps me know that you're here. So please do so. Let's go. Okay. I also just want to flag, because we are, as much as we can, living with Crip time. If this goes over, my intention is to go to the workshop after this. So if we can find a way to make sure that that's comfortable for the facilitators of the workshop, and also that they get the full time that they want to have, I just want to throw that out there. Okay. All right. Here is the talk. Good. Okay. I'm going to just press the button.
Bisexual flag-themed letters on a black background read, "Don't worry, I'm just on Quip time, Unambitiousness and Access First Working." Underneath this, white letters on a black background say, "Quiplash case study on y'all are lucky I'm still here." Parentheses, I'm Amelia from the past, and I will be audio describing the slides on this PowerPoint for you today. You're welcome.
So yes, this is a case study of our most recent project that Shivaangee was the director on. Y'all are lucky I'm still here. Just to give you an idea of, or we're going to call it Y'allish, probably a lot for short, because I did not realize when I thought up that title how difficult English people would find saying the word y'all. And I'm sure you can tell by my accent that I'm based in Sheffield. Al and I are based in Sheffield, the other half of Quiplash. Anyway, so what we're going to do is I'm going to give you some key terms just so you know where we're going. I'm going to give some context of the lineage of Quiplash that builds into some of the main principles that we work with. And then Shiv and I are going to talk about Y'allish and this really lovely, cool, magical, joyful, queer disabled space that we got to make that, I don't know, I'm holding as just like, it gave me a lot of hope and joy and stuff. Okay, so.
Terms. Integrated Audio Description, or IAD. Mythobiography. Quip. Quip time. Access First Working. Unambitiousness.
A little other note, I am dyslexic, and I often say mythobiology when I mean mythobiography. So if I say mythobiology, I'm not trying to introduce a new word, I just did a dyslexic. Mythobiography is the word we're going to talk about. I said the right one. Good. Okay. So Quiplash, Kenny gave a really good overarching explanation of Quiplash and my work with it. It is a company that's run by myself and my wife, Lander-Cavallo, who's over there wearing the very big mouth jumper that is very cool. We started this company for a number. We sort of jokingly, but also mean it when we say we started Quiplash out of spite. We got sick of being queer disabled people that didn't have any queer disabled spaces, and we decided to just start making them ourselves. In this, we do prioritize blind and visually impaired people because in our experience, at least in this country, access for blind and visually impaired people is often something that is thought about very last minute or not included at all, including in other disability-led spaces. And so we're here to reverse that hierarchy as much as we can. And so to start at the beginning of Quiplash, we have our first show.
Sightly Drag and Friends. In this photo, we see a bunch of drag queens, kings, and things all dressed up in their finery. They are glittery, they are glitzy, they are campy, they are colorful. This photo exudes joy. In this picture, multiple of the people that are featured are blind and or visually impaired, and they all look fabulous. We have Tito Bone at the front in a gold suit grabbing their crotch. We have Ebony Rose Dark next to them, posing like everyone behind her is her backing dancer. We have Venetia Blind towering behind all of them, looking stunning in velvet and blue with her signature eye patch. Everybody looks incredibly joyful. Arms are splayed widely, and there are big smiles on everybody's faces.
So Unsightly Drag and Friends is the show that Kenny saw at the Queering the Crip, Cripping the Queer festival in Berlin in 2022. That was a much more expanded version of what we originally did. When we first tried this idea out, I approached this as a researcher. We weren't necessarily that worried about making a show. We just wanted to try some stuff. And it was 2019 in the UK. The landscape was quite different for the arts and disability arts. We were given money. I know, right? Something that doesn't seem to happen really anymore, but I'll talk about that later maybe. But we were given money from the Live Arts Development Agency and Arts Council England. We were partnering with a blind-led theatre company in London called Extant, and we were working with the National Theatre New Works Department. They gave us costumes and space and a lot of support. It was a type of, I think I kind of took for granted how resourced that project was, especially now that we're really struggling to get resources to do stuff. But my goal was to go, what happens when you put blind people who can't access drag into drag? What happens when people who do drag have to think about blind people? And it was a 2-week research and development period where 7 blind and visually impaired queer people, including myself, got in a room with 2 access consultants, a bunch of prominent London-based drag performers, a bunch of access workers, and a partridge in a pear tree. And we just saw what happened when we tried to do stuff. And what ended up coming out of it was this really slick show that we still get asked to do from time to time, and we really enjoy doing. And the things that we found out of this, there's 2 principles that were in our key terms that came out of this. So our version of integrated audio description, or IAD. For folks who don't know what that is or who are new to it, it is a different type of audio description than the headset version where an audio describer is hired. They speak into a microphone that transmits to headsets. They're often separate from the art piece. Integrated audio description is part of the fabric of a piece. It's created from the moment the piece starts to exist. My opinion is that integrated audio description is only fully integrated when it is heard by everyone who can hear it, regardless of whether or not they need it. And it is something that if it wasn't in the piece would feel incomplete. And so with that, because we were working in such a specifically queer medium, we also started developing queer integrated audio description. And it has a couple of tenets that I think are really important. So first, we were embracing queer and or crip failure by which I mean inability to do what's quote unquote normal or expected, so therefore we can do anything else. As soon as you don't achieve the one thing that's called success, a whole bunch of other options open up, and maybe you want to do those instead. We also played with audio description being unapologetically biased, humanized, and emotive. And in the case of this, it ended up coming out as being quite funny, which is really nice. And also being vulnerable. Kind of, how can something that's an authority for how blind people understand the world also not know things sometimes and still be trusted? And I'm still working that one out. The other thing that we played with was access first working. I don't know if we invented that term, but if I did, then feel free to quote me on it. But it is what it sounds like. The first thing that we do is access. And thinking about this from a disability justice perspective and intersectionality, obviously we mean access in terms of removing barriers for people so that they are not disabled in the space, as much as possible, not disabled in the spaces that we're in. But also what gives people access to being able to do more than just survive. So that can include things like we make a point of paying our artists as much as we can. So there's the union minimums, and then there's what we can afford when we've been given funding. And we do the what we can afford more than minimums whenever possible. We also are more interested in making people feel safe and comfortable than producing an output. We want people to just be happy first and have a moment where they can chill, because for us, we're not interested in making art out of hardship or trauma. And then there's also just the concept of time. And here is the word quip, which is also in Quiplash. Quip is a portmanteau of the words queer and crip. And so quip time is the coming together of queer time and crip time. I don't have time to get into what each of those mean respectively. But in general, I think Quip time is its own kind of lived experience of being a Quip person and how time functions for you. And I feel like right now I have a good sense of what it feels like, but I'm looking for some words. So maybe if people have any ideas, they can give me some words. All right, next slide.
Ambitiousness. Rose LaRose, Carolyn Jungst, and Lisa Rikenna. The photo featured shows Lisa on the left and Caro on the right mid-performance. They are both covered from head to ankle in black see-through mesh and very little else. Their bare feet are on show as well. Lisa, who has a distinctive bald head, is sat with her head in between her knees, and Caro is on her side, looking like she's about to get onto all fours and crawl towards something above the photo. They're both on a shaggy carpet that is lit in a moody teal.
So I mentioned this show and unambitiousness, because this concept of unambitiousness is not something that Quiplash invented. This is something we were given by these two very wonderful German performers. And I also mentioned the pandemic because I think it is vital that we acknowledge it as something that started to affect us in many ways in 2020 and is still affecting us. And in the case of Quiplash, it meant that we had to completely shift how we worked. So we started off thinking we were going to be a pretty traditional performance creation company, theater company. Then the first lockdown saw both Al and me losing our normal paid work. And Quiplash moved to being primarily a training and consulting company and working online. And this piece, Rose LaRose, was one of the main creative outputs that we were brought into, where these two performers, along with another, there were 4 performers working in a theater in Hamburg. And then I was working remotely from where we lived at the time, which was Croydon in London. And they had this term, unambitious working practice or unambitiousness, which basically was, you don't actually have to do anything. We trust you as an expert, so you don't have to do anything, so you get to do everything you want. And what I found, as soon as that kind of framing was put around me, was that I felt really free to have so many ideas to make stuff. Because the way they worked is they paid me to hold a certain amount of time, but then they didn't really worry about whether or not I worked every single minute that they did. Did I do some tasks? Yes. Did they like them? It doesn't matter. So it was just a really relaxed way to work. And especially because I was working out of my own home, it was just quite cool. So I'm just going to give a shout out to Caro and Lisa. They also played with queer audio description and kind of took on a lot of the tenets of that. The show had integrated audio description that moved from German to English in a really interesting way as well.
Y'all are lucky I'm still here. Y'allish, University of Reading and South Street Arts Center. The photo featured here shows the Y'allish company in a line. From left to right, we have Shivaangee, Dot, Maria, Amelia, Al, Charmaine, Cynthia, and Aday. Everybody's in bright and comfy clothing, and we're standing in a brightly lit rehearsal room. Behind us is a stage and a sound system and a big black curtain. In front of us is a small spinning wheel. It is light wood colored and looks a bit like the steering wheel of a pirate ship.
So this is our most recent show. It's not drag, which I'm excited about, because I think because our main show output for up until recently has been unsightly drag, people think we just do drag, and that was never the intention. So it's really nice to do something that's not drag. But yeah, this was a devising research and development week, which basically meant for me and Shiv that there was an idea and a group of people that we really like. And we just kind of came together to see what we could do. The initial impulse for this was to get a bunch of people who are either approaching or in midlife and mid-career, and to kind of feel what it feels to be in that life position, and like what kind of stories we want to tell, what things we're dealing with as midlife and mid-career queer disabled people. I've got a very dyslexic, hang on, let me just read this. Shiv, do you want to say anything about Y'allish while I try and read my own handwriting?
Sure. I mean, this was the first time that Amelia and I worked together on like an internal project, I guess. Yeah. We've been together on projects for other people, and this was, a coming together of our practices. And maybe I can start to join some of the dots that you've already introduced in terms of Quiplash's working principles and how this week kind of panned out. But I guess one of the kind of key things that for me felt very Quiplash about this week that I think is worth bringing up here in this context is unlike a lot of other creation processes that I've been in where you're kind of trying to mine the room or mine the context to create something and express something, this felt very much like the thing that we're going to create kind of already exists in the room, so we just have to like find where it is, find what it is. And for me that links really closely back to this idea of access first working and unambitiousness, because your orientation is not to reach into the unknown and like reach and create something that's not already there, but instead it's like we are all here with our like varied, rich practices and interests and experiences and skill sets and roles in this process. So what do we have here, I guess? Yeah. I'll let you carry on. I'll leave that.
Thank you. That's really, that's good though. Thank you for saying all those things that are very succinct. This was a space that was meant to be kind of like celebratory, really. How cool is it that in the current landscape, this was November 2025, so not that long ago, how cool that in the current landscape, we got a little bit of money to just come and do stuff. And to the credit of University of Reading and South Street Arts, they kind of just went, here's some money, do what you want. And look, this is still based in like academic sort of confines. There were a lot of things in the lead up to this week that were really annoying. And I say that with love because I think the people that we were working with directly also found the things annoying. But the fact that we were given money and entrusted with it to kind of just use it in whatever way was going to help us the most, I think is increasingly rare, and we were very privileged to get that. So we, first and foremost, were like, same thing as Unsightly Drag, let's just get people in a room, explore some stuff. It doesn't matter if we don't feel like we've made anything at the end, if we had a creative week where we feel like we tried things. This was also, I think, a thing that happens when Quiplash arrives and does things. Our focus is often and always blind and visually impaired people, but it's also led by two neurodivergent people. Well, three now. We have a producer that we work with 1.5 days a week. And like attracts like, so we end up having all neurodivergent people in a room, so it becomes a very neurodivergent space. So the types of celebration-y things we were doing were allowing people to share at length special interests, normalizing vocal stims. The one that comes to mind a lot is Dot, who was one of our creative access workers. In a break would kind of, they're quite tall, and so they'd sort of stand over everyone with their fingers touching each other in a kind of Mr. Burnsy triangle, and go, does anybody have any wants or needs? And then everybody would go, wants or needs, as a kind of like loving echo of, I heard that you did this, and then, we'd get on with our break and whatever. But it also meant that Charmaine, who, in addition to being an incredible performer and clown, Charmaine owns a yarn business called Yarn Tings, and she got to come and run a workshop teaching us how to spin yarn, which is why the spinning wheel is there, and why, as I will get to in a minute, this show became really focused on fiber arts and textiles as a method and a metaphor for thinking about legacy, community, time passing, slowness, hyper-focus, all this stuff that was already in the room by the nature of who was in the room. It also meant that we got to do a bunch of group singing, which I brought in and is my favorite thing. And so that was also very cool.
And I'm just going to add that the whole week actually started with each person introducing their practice as like the material with which we were creating. So there was like a very open sort of invitation for each person to bring something to everybody else, just as another demonstration of like kind of it's already here, what we're trying to create.
Yeah, and it was, I think, because Quiplash had been given this idea of unambitiousness as a creative practice after Unsightly Drag, I think we had it in the way we made Unsightly Drag, but we'd not gotten to like concentrate it into a new project that was ours yet. And so this was our first time of going, we're going to really try and embody what we think this principle is. And so in the case of the structure of the week, it often meant things like slow starts, early finishes, elongated breaks where we would let somebody speak on the tangent that they'd been on before we started working. And we still did loads. I just want to, and I don't mean this in a like productivity capitalism way, because it was relaxed, because, and also we had snacks, soft seating, lots of different places people could go and escape if they needed a break that wasn't a kind of designated break for the day. hot water bottles. It was in the middle of November in the UK, so it was kind of miserable, rainy, not cold, but not warm, kind of like now. And it just meant that people, and also we started the day with you take what you need and ask for what you need. And we're here to do as much of that, of supporting each other as we can. People really relaxed, and we made so much more material than I had expected, which it was really very pleasant and just really exciting. It's one of the few projects that we've run that I've left tired but not drained, if that makes sense. And it was really cool. We also, in the midst of that, had the idea, we brought in a bunch of multidisciplinary people. And so every single person up here does about 1 billion different art forms, jobs, etc. And we gave people a title and an offer to frame how that title would work. And this was in particular for Dot and a Day, who were brought in as we called them creative access workers. And what that meant as a kind of basis was, please be the access workers for the people in the group. Make sure that people have what they need in the room. And also, if an exercise is fun and interesting to you and you want to join. If that starts to impede on your ability to rest yourself, tell us and we'll sort it out. And Dot and a Day, who are both really incredible artists in their own right, just dove in. It was really great. So, yes. Okay, so I think the next one is the ball of yarn. Am I right? Yes, okay. So now, if you'll indulge, we're going to do some art. So Shivaangee has, I believe, in their hand a ball of yarn. This was yarn that was weaved throughout the week via the spinning wheel that was in the photo that you just saw, or had described to you, by Al and Charmaine, respectively. And we're going to kind of mimic something for people in the room that we did in the show, that Charmaine did, which is we're going to offer passing this yarn between everybody, and so you can just hold a little bit of it in your hand or like across your lap, whatever is accessible to you. If you do not want to do this, you don't have to. And for people at home who we can't hand the yarn to, I invite you to use this as a moment to reflect on the cloth that is probably very likely on your body, and the way it's made and held together. While this happens, I'm going to play the sound of the spinning wheel as it's spinning the yarn that Shivaangee's holding. And for folks who can hear it, I just want you to listen to it, let your mind wander, see what thoughts come up. And for people who can't hear it, I want to invite you to leave the space for your mind, have the space to let your mind wander and see what thoughts come up. Just to describe the sound, I think it sounds like a ship a little bit. So there's a squeaking that happens that kind of sounds like rocking. There's a spooling sound that kind of sounds like rowing. And it's a really active, there's a lot of air and movement in the sound. So that's the context I will give. I will also.
And there's like a trundling along, you're trundling through time.
Definitely a rhythm, yeah.
And the invitation, just to be super clear, is to hold it, pass it round to anyone, reject it, etc.
Yes, yeah. Keep it moving if you can. All right, the sound is coming.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, next slide. You can feel free to keep the yarn ball moving throughout while we're talking.
2 photos from the R&D week. On the left, we have Amelia sat down knitting the bright pink sleeves of a jumper. Standing behind them and pumping their fist and going, yes, is Charmaine. And on the floor next to Amelia is Aday, who is sat cross-legged and is looking down at their notebook. The photo on the right shows Charmaine standing in the middle of a semicircle of some audience members and other members of the Yawlish team. She is wearing a bright yellow knitted shirt that was knitted by Al, actually, and some black trousers, and also has some woolly socks that I'm assuming, based on what we know about Charmaine, that she probably also made. Behind her back, she is holding a ball of yarn, and fun fact, that ball of yarn was spun by Al and Charmaine throughout the R&D week. And this ball of yarn has a very long strand or tail or end that has been passed between the audience members sat in the semicircle around the stage. This means that from Charmaine's hands into the audience, we have this big web of yarn that is being weaved and growing between the audience members, because as Charmaine moves, she hands the yarn to different people to hold, and this makes the web bigger and more intricate. It also means that as she moves, she has to do more work to navigate the web. She has to step over, crouch under, and keep herself safe and keep the audience connected.
So in the sharing that we did at the end of our development period, we ran this as an open rehearsal because I think Shiv and I came to the realization that we have a lot of good ideas, but we didn't quite, we didn't want to force it into feeling like a show shape yet, because that felt disingenuous to what we'd done. So we ran it as an open rehearsal where Shiv directed us, and we showed the scenes that we thought kind of encapsulated the ideas that we kept hitting on the most. And so these ideas were the concept of legacy and tradition, and that is blind and visual impairment legacy with integrated audio description. There's also just textiles as a literal thing that's very important, and also a metaphor for so many things. So there's a really fabulous book called The Fabric of Civilization that I highly recommend you read. And it opens with a quote that says, "The most profound technologies are those that disappear," which is why I wanted to give everyone a moment to think about fabric, yarn. I promise you, just based on how unavailable fabric and yarn and string and things that, you make clothes and sheets and ship sails and all that sort of stuff with, that you have people in your ancestry that made something that contributed to textiles at some point. It would have been kind of a requirement, probably. But also, these fields are often mostly populated by women, gender non-conforming people, disabled people. They did have and still have their own communities that people are really fiercely protective of and really support. There's always goss and messiness in any community, but in general, the support that exists for people who want to learn these types of things and keep these traditions alive is really specific and really beautiful. We were also playing with consensual audience participation. So the right to not be perceived while also being included. And that can mean holding a piece of yarn. That can mean being on the outside of the circle that Charmaine is making while still observing things. That can mean it being described to you by Dot and Aday as Charmaine moves and also spoke her own stories. We also played with mythobiography, which is basically using impetus from people's lives and experiences to tell new stories. And Shiv brought us a lot of very cool exercises and prompts that I'll let you talk about that helped us build that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is also a chance to speak about audio description in all its glory, but yeah, kind of continuing this thread that I'm kind of spinning about about kind of creating from what's already there. We invited everyone to bring some objects that represent past lives, current lives, maybe future lives. It could be domestic things, natural things, outdoor things. Bring something tangible with you to the R&D. And one of the things that, and so obviously this was like, you know, a kind of direct access way to excavate for everyone to excavate their own experience in a way that made sense to them in that moment. But also it gave us a chance to play around with audio description. So one of the things we did, for example, was have the whole group collectively audio describe the object before the person who brought the object talked about the object. And it was, yeah, a real representation of how audio description can be from a place of this is what I see, but it can be from a place of this is what I sense, and it can also be from a place of this is what I need to know about what is there. It can be about zooming out, zooming in. It can be about what is sensed, what is touched, and collectively building up this idea of the thing. So that was, for example, yeah, one of the ways that, yeah, integrated audio description sort of started to come into play. Did you want to add to that bit? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say our version of IAD for this show in particular was about slowness. Audio description often feels slow for people who are not who don't need it, and I have a vested interest in everything that I work on that has IAD or that I consult on, that audio description is given the space that it needs and that it wants to take up. In this case, it created this really meditative, like kind of sort of pace that I want to be. I want to be kind of celebratory of, and also worry that we don't just get trapped in that, because it can also be fast and funny and kind of frenetic and that sort of stuff.
And it was also kind of building up audio description in this kind of collective manner was also a reminder, and I think you said this before, of being unapologetically biased, but a reminder of like what can be generated when we are really tuned in to our own subjectivities, and how that it's going to be really unique from somebody else's description of the thing. And I think that's like one thing, again, that I think Quiplash really advocates for in audio description training is like, we're not going to pretend there's some sort of neutrality here in audio description or what's being scripted or observed, but we're going to lean into how I am seeing this thing and therefore how I want to audio describe this thing with my whole bag of subjectivity and lived experience and specific lenses, and like being really aware of what those are. Yeah. And that worked really well for the R&D because we were all coming from different subjectivities with different lived experiences. I also wanted to talk about how integrated audio description meant that the audio description was the place we began, that became the text, that became the material that we were then playing with, that became the poetry, that became the script, which is, yeah, again, really unusual to use it as a starting point in a lot of contexts that aren't this context, I guess.
Yeah. I'm aware of time, so I think I do have a clip from the sharing, but the sound quality is quite bad. So I might leave it, and then if people want, maybe I can play it afterwards if people want to experience it, but I also just want to be respectful of, if there's something happening after this, maybe people want to ask questions before we're done. But I also want to, I've done a lot more talking so far, so I want to give Shiv some more chances to talk, because Shiv is, like they said, somebody that we've worked with on a project that we were both brought into, but this was quite a new working relationship for us. And so I just wanted to give you some space to talk about your experience with that.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons it worked really well on reflection is that I have a facilitation practice, which for many years through which I guess I've been interrogating ableism and racism. So yeah, I guess like the kind of principles I was bringing, I felt like just vibed.
Yeah.
We vibed.
We vibed.
But yeah, just to kind of give a quick, I guess, summary of some of the principles I'm talking about. I feel like, for example, so facilitating a room, I feel like there are often a lot of unspoken, unverbalized codes that exist in the room around what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what you're meant to be doing, etc. That's even more so the case, I think, in a lot of art spaces where people have been there for many years. Lots of these unspoken codes get really like invisibly embedded, and that can create like a real oppressive power dynamic for lots of people. So yeah, one of the principles I come in for, mainly also for myself, is just to name really clearly like what is happening and not presume that any layer of reality is like not relevant. Yeah, so naming power dynamics, naming like the different experiences that may exist in the room, naming how different experiences may be receiving the facilitation. Yeah, and I think going on from, one of the reasons that I feel like we're really connected, and also I feel like I also learned this from Quiplash early on in my audio description training, is really acknowledging your subjective experience. And I think as a facilitator, that's really important as well, because kind of being really aware and forthcoming about your subjectivity encourages, like sets the tone and sets the expectations for everyone in the room to also think about, well, what is my subjectivity in this room? What am I bringing? And crucially, I think kind of takes us away from the assumption that can very easily pop up that there's like a mainstream way of experiencing what's happening, or there's like a neutral way of experiencing what's happening. Yeah, so these are just, some of the things that I think kind of underpin my facilitation practice, and that has come from like an artistic inquiry into disorientation. I used to always describe myself as someone who's always disoriented, and I am like slowly learning to understand that in terms of autism and racialized experience. But out of this experience, constant ongoing experience of disorientation, one of the things that has really anchored me, and which I now do as a facilitator, and I hope that anchors and kind of lowers the barriers of participation, is just naming things that are currently happening.
I really like what Sandy said at the beginning of her speech. I'm going to say the quiet bit out loud. I'm yoink. That's that, isn't it?
Yeah. So just to name something that's like currently really distracting me in my body, is I feel like we're running out of time, and I don't want to like overspeak or like go on tangents and take up time. So please, let's continue the conversation outside of our slot if that feels like relevant or interesting to you. But I'm going to hand back to you, Amelia.
Yeah, thank you. I think actually, if it's good with you, Shiv, we can call it there, and see if anybody has any questions. Thanks for listening, and also if you can maybe start to ball up the yarn.
Quiplash logo, black letters on
sorry.
a yellow background. Wow. Underneath the logo, there is the Quiplash website. That's quiplash.co.uk.
Yeah, we're inviting questions. I think
that is QUIP.LASH.co.uk. Or you can find us on Instagram at Quiplash Arts. That's at Quiplash Arts. Thanks very much.
All right, yeah. So, Kenny, I guess, do we hand it back to you?
Sure.
I have a question.
Yes, Abby.
I don't know if the mic's on. Is it on? Oh, here we go. Hey, hi.
Hey.
It's Abby. I guess it's just picking up on some of the threads in that last little bit of chat, and also like the integrated AD all the way through. It's basically about gossip as a way of practice. Like it feels like you're like, even the way you started describing, like audio describing, like, oh, and my top came from look how well it's knitted and stuff. I'm really interested in like gossip as a way of breaking down and naming some of these power hierarchies and making access more playful. And I just wondered if you had anything to say on that.
Yeah.
It's more of a comment than a question.
Oh, it's really good. Thank you. That's very useful. That sounded like I was being sarcastic. I did mean that was a really good question. Thank you.
No, I was here for it. We were vibing.
So I think that gossip is something that as Quiplash we allow for and we lean into. I think lots of different people from lots of marginalized groups require gossip as a method for staying safe. You know, who is the person that could be damaging in or outside of your own community? What are the safe spaces to go to that if you name them in a way that's like tangible for people outside of your community, it might disappear. You know, these are things that are also, if it's not done through gossip, they're done through visual means, which means that blind people miss them a lot. And so gossip is something we find really important. And also I think, you know, we do a lot of work to live in joy as an act of resistance. But shit's really hard right now. And sometimes you need to just sit with your friends and bitch. You know what I mean? Like, so there's that. I also love the idea of audio description as gossip. And I do think, I don't know if I'd made that connection explicitly, but I do think that one of the things, not that, you know, the audio description is there for blind people, but one of the things that we definitely get from sighted people who experience our type of integrated audio description is that they feel like they've kind of been let in on some information that they're never given. And for a lot of neurodivergent people, whether or not they can see stuff, they find that very helpful. It adds context. And yeah, I will also just say that there's a style of audio description called whisper audio description that was, as far as I know, invented by a blind-led theater company in Zagreb, Croatia. They're called New Life Theater. And because they don't have the resources for audio description headsets, they do this where they bring in people to just sit next to blind people and whisper in their ear the audio description. And they run a festival every 2 years called the Blind in Theater Festival. And when you are a blind person performing with an audience that's doing that, it's incredible. It's incredible because you can feel the audience because they make so much noise, but not disruptive noise, at least not for me. And that always feels very gossipy. Like sometimes you have like a line of people where the describer will go, "He's picked up a watermelon." And then somebody will go, "He's picked up a buttermelon. He's eating some butter." And it's sort of like a game of telephone. Like it becomes really interesting. So yeah.
Are there any other questions? I think we've got about 2 seconds left. But maybe it might be a good point to wrap up and give everyone a chance to go to the workshop. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If you have any more questions, come talk to me. Thank you. Thank you to the organizers of this event. We appreciate you. Thank you.